Hello and welcome to another episode of the Undercurrent Stories podcast, the show where we dive into the hidden depths and discover the stories about the people and the world around us. Imagine that you're driving up a slip road onto the motorway. You check the rearview mirror and you see an animal chasing you. As it looms up behind you at an ever-increasing speed, you see the unmistakable face of a big cat looming ever closer. As the slender spotted cat with a long tail overtakes you, you realise that you're witnessing the fastest land animal on the planet, the cheetah. The cheetah relies on its speed rather than brute force when it comes to hunting, but with a shrinking population, this predator is listed as vulnerable. Here to talk about cheetahs, and recently back from Namibia in southwest Africa, where she had first-hand experience working with cheetahs with the Cheetah Conservation Fund, I'm delighted to welcome Sue Heim to the show. Hello and welcome to Undercurrent Stories, Sue.
Hi, Bob. Thank you for having me today.
Before we talk about your work with cheetahs, could you just tell us a little about yourself and your life's journey and how you eventually became involved with the Cheetah Conservation Fund in Namibia?
Well, I live in San Diego, and I'm a volunteer at the San Diego Zoo. I am what is known as an interpretive volunteer, which likely in the UK is known as a docent. What that means is I literally will stand in front of an animal and talk about that animal to our guests. As such, I learned a lot about all of the cats that are at the San Diego Zoo. And most importantly, I learned about the cheetah. Because of that, I also learned about the Cheetah Conservation Fund. The Cheetah Conservation Fund was founded by Dr. Lori Marker in 1990. And I met Dr. Marker at a fundraising event in San Diego several years ago. I was immediately impressed about her passion for this animal. At the time that she founded CCF, no one knew much about anything about the cheetah, literally zero. So at that time, I vowed that I would do everything that I could do to help the cheetah. And so far, I haven't been very much disappointed with my work. So currently with CCF, I am a volunteer here in San Diego, a donor, a sponsor. And when I was at CCF in Namibia, I was a working guest for 4 weeks.
Wow, that's a fantastic experience. And what is it about big cats in particular, or do you like all cats? Is there something about cats that you have an affinity for, Sue?
Well, it actually was a joke as I was learning about how to be an interpretive volunteer at the zoo. I have 2 cats. I grew up with dogs, but as I moved into condo or apartment lifestyle, it was much more convenient to have a cat. And when I travel a lot, it's much more convenient to have cats. All cats are very similar to each other, whether it's a small domestic cat, they act like the larger species. So lions, tigers, cheetah, and even the smaller African cats like a serval all have the same mannerisms. They all act the same. They all sort of have, they're so similar, and they're all so much fun to watch. They're so much fun to talk about, and they're all endangered in one way or another. They are all endangered. So having my small little heathen monsters here at home enables me to have a closer relationship with these endangered cats, and then being able to talk about these endangered cats, all of them, because I do talk about all of the cats at the zoo, being able to talk about these endangered cats at the zoo and help get our guests interested and get them to fall in love with all of them so that they can help share the message share their conservation messages and help ensure that these animals survive, because all of these animals are important to their species and to the world.
Yes, it's interesting when I heard you talking about how cats are very similar, whatever they are, lions, tigers, cheetahs, and even domestic cats. And I've got a cat like you have. And I sometimes watch him in the garden where he's sort of, he doesn't usually do it, get one, but where he's stalking a pigeon, for example. And it just takes you back to, you sort of think he could be in the savannah.
Exactly. The only difference between them is who their predators are, how they hunt, what they hunt, and where they live. And for instance, the cheetah lives primarily in Africa. There are very few numbers of them in Asia, but originally they lived in Asia and in Africa. Tigers live primarily in Asia. Lions live primarily in Africa. So it's quite interesting. And then don't forget the leopard. There's leopards that live only in Africa and Asia. And then the jaguar, which personally I think is the most fearful of all, lives only in the Americas, what we call the New World. So there's quite a variety of them. The way you can tell the difference is the cheetah is the only one that has spots and tear marks. If they have spots that form what we call ringlets, or they are either going to be a leopard or a jaguar. And you're never going to see a jaguar in Africa or Asia, and you're never going to see a leopard in the Americas.
Well, that's useful to know. Before we talk about the endangered aspect of them, are you able just to tell us a little bit? I mean, I mentioned in the intro there about the speed that they do, and everybody knows them as this long, slender creature that goes extremely fast, as the fastest land animal. Could you tell us a little bit about how they live? How long do they live? How many children do they? How many cubs do they have? How far do they travel? Are you able to give us some of that information, please?
Sure. So cheetahs generally live in the wild between 8 to 10 years in human care and managed care, which would be maybe in an accredited zoo or, for instance, at the CCF centers in Namibia or Somaliland. They can live double that. They can live to be maybe 18 years. They are, cheetah primarily are the low end of the apex predator list in Africa. So they live primarily in either a solitary existence if they're female, or if they're male, they will probably live in coalitions. So a mom may cheetahs are a little bit opposite of most other animals. So most other cats, the female will have sort of a set territory, and then the males will roam around, moving into the female territory. The females are the ones that are more roamers, where the males will have a little bit more of a set territory. So when cheetah cubs are born to a mom, the cheetah cubs are maybe anywhere between 2 to maybe 6 at the most. They're fuzzy and gray, and they look a lot like a honey badger. And that is their initial defense, because honey badgers are very fierce and feared by almost every animal in Africa. And if a jackal comes across a cheetah den and they see what looks like a honey badger in there, they're going to take off. They're not going to actually bother those little baby cheetah cubs. So the cheetahs eventually grow up. Mom goes out, hunts, comes back, feeds them milk. Eventually, she teaches them how to hunt. At about 18 months of age, most of the females will separate from mom. They have learned how to hunt. Girls are very smart. They go off on their own. They're solo. They're going to go off and find their own areas in which to hunt and roam. The boys are a little less likely to go off on their own. They will do what is called forming a coalition. And all of the boys can actually stay in that coalition for the rest of their lives. They may even bring in boys from there may be a solo cub from another litter from another mom. And that solo cub may join that coalition. These boys, very successful hunting as a coalition. Girls, always successful. But the sad thing about a cheetah, no matter whether it's boys or girls, they have a tendency to end up losing most of their prey to the other apex predators. Cheetahs are non-confrontational, and what that means is that they will lose most of their prey to lions, leopards, jackals, even vultures. They will always walk up and they will steal whatever prey that the cheetah has. Because the cheetah can't fight, they don't want to hurt a leg, because if they do, then they can't run. They will take one last bite and they will run off. Even a coalition of several males will generally not fight a lion or a leopard. They will take off and they will run away. So
that's interesting. So I always sort of tarred big cats as a generic form of fierce, ferocious animal, and yet you're saying there that the cheetahs actually won't fight other animals.
The cheetah is not necessarily known as a big cat. So most of the other big cats don't purr. The cheetah is the only cat that purrs. The
Oh,
cheetah
right.
does not roar. The cheetah sounds that they make sort of like chirping. They will purr. They make stuttering sounds. They do not roar. Lions and leopards are the ones that make roaring sounds, or like, for instance, a leopard makes what we call a sawing sound. It kind of sort of sounds like they're about ready to cough up a hairball. But a cheetah is a little bit of a different classification than the rest of the big cats. And then you mentioned their speed. So a cheetah will run about 70 miles per hour, which is, I think, about 112 kilometers per hour. They and they're known for their speed. Very short distances, very short sprinters. But that short sprinting doesn't allow them to jump onto the back of an animal to kill it. So what they do is they have a secret tool. Most people don't know about this. They have a slightly enlarged dew claw. So if you ever watch, you'll see a cheetah chasing. They will reach out and trip whatever their prey is. For instance, if they're chasing a springbok, they'll reach out and they'll trip the springbok. The springbok rolls down on the ground. As soon as that springbok is on the ground, they're on it. They're on the throat. They start to strangle it. So a cheetah kill is always a strangle, where a leopard or a lion will be the spine and the back.
Yeah, there's some big differences there, isn't there?
Yes, there is very big differences there.
So talking about the sad aspect of it, I was doing a bit of research in terms of numbers, and it seemed that the numbers of cheetahs in Africa is 2,500 to 3,000 of them or something.
So there's actually, well, in Africa, there's about, I think, 7,100 total. So there are about 9%, I think, of their original range in Africa and Asia. In Asia, I think in Iran, there are maybe 50 of isolated subpopulations. In Africa, they are in, I think it's 6 countries, Namibia, Botswana, South Africa, Mozambique, Angola, and Zambia. They basically form a polygon. There's very, very few of them. We recently, and in fact, it'll be 2 years ago this month, reintroduced cheetahs into India. They had been extinct in India for 70 years. So we reintroduced some subpopulations from Namibia and South Africa into India, and they are actually starting to thrive right now. They're having babies. They're doing really, really well. And India is really, really proud to have, to be able to say that they have cheetah back in the wild in their areas.
And what is the... We talked there about the population that's declined over the years. What's the biggest threat to the cheetah in Southwest Africa?
So there's actually 3 things. There's the human-wildlife conflict, there's illegal wildlife pet trade, and then there's habitat loss. So human-wildlife conflict, and that's the one thing that we're working on more closely with the CCF facility in Namibia, is when for instance, a farmer who has goats thinks that his goats are being killed by a cheetah. More often than not, it's not a cheetah. It's more often maybe a leopard or something like that. So what we're doing to mitigate that is we're teaching farmers how they can more safely secure their goats. We have livestock-guarding dogs that we raise and that we sell to some of the farmers that they can use to help protect their goat herds. They're very large dogs. They're usually Anatolian shepherds. They have a very large bark. And remember I said cheetahs are not confrontational. So they're going to see that large barking dog and they're going to walk away. They're not going to go anywhere near them.
And would those dogs also deter lions and leopards?
They also deter lions and leopards, and they will even kill a snake if they see a snake anywhere near a goat. So they're very protective. And eventually they can help take care of the goats by taking them out to the grassy areas and bringing them back home at night. So we also teach the farmers, we have a model farm in Namibia. We teach them how they can better protect their goats with, very specific fencing. We teach them how that they can kid all at the same time rather than kidding, throughout the year so that they can do all their vaccinations at one time. So we help teach them how to be more effective farmers. The illegal pet wildlife trade is more prominent in the Horn of Africa, and we have a cheetah conservation facility in Somaliland as well. And there, because it's very close to Yemen and very close to other Arab countries, cheetah conservation is more involved with the confiscation of cheetah cubs. So you have probably seen on social media where people have cheetahs as pets. Cheetahs are not pets. Cheetahs are wild animals, and we want to keep the wild in the wild. So in Somaliland, we're trying to, besides rescuing the confiscated cheetah, we're trying to educate people that these are not pets. You shouldn't be stealing the cubs from their moms. You shouldn't be raising them. They do not do well in human. If you're trying to bring them home, they do not do well at your home. They have a very specialized diet. They don't thrive. They barely survive. And more often than not, when we get them from a confiscated from a confiscation situation, they are actually in really, really bad shape, and some of them don't even survive. And then finally, the habitat loss. So a lot of what has happened is there will be farms that are being built. A lot of also what we're working on is there's thorn bush encroachment in Namibia. And what that is thorn bush basically prevents grasslands from growing. And if there are no grasslands, there's no hoofstock. If there's no hoofstock, there's nothing that any of the predators can eat. So we are working to manage the encroaching bush, the thorn bush especially, by we have a sub company that's called Bush Block, and we take thorn bush and we convert it into fuel that can be sold in other countries in Africa. We also are working with Steam BioBlock, and Steam BioBlock is working so that we can take thorn bush and convert it to renewable energy. So rural areas in Namibia, for example, can get access to energy where they don't have energy because they are so rural. So we're working with those. CCF is working with those organizations as well.
On those three aspects there, the amount of work involved that the CCF must be doing, it seems enormous. I would guess that a lot of it would be coaching and training people to actually do that work. So, for example, on with the dogs and everything to protect the livestock. You say the education of them. How well received is that by the farmers?
It's surprisingly actually really well received. So the model farm is intended to be a way of educating the farmers without being in their face about this is what you should do. We are showing them without telling them how to be an effective farmer. The research facility, it's education and research facility that's in Namibia, is built so that we can, we have the model farm. We have goats, we have hundreds of goats, and we have sheep, and we also have cows, and we're raising them, and we're showing them how we are protecting these animals. And in addition to the livestock guarding dogs that we have scat detection dogs. So the scat detection dogs, if we have a farmer who thinks that there might be a human-wildlife conflict, or he might think that a cheetah is killing his goats, we can go out and we can look and we can identify whether that scat is from a cheetah or from another wild animal. And what we do is Dr. Lori Marker calls the cheetah scat gold. It's cheetah gold, because we can not only identify that it's a cheetah, but we can also identify quite often from the DNA whether we've seen that cheetah before, how healthy that cheetah is, what the cheetah is eating. There's so much that we can identify from the scat. So
I guess you can also sort of find out its locality, can you, as well, through that?
Yes, exactly. So we can tell, like, for instance, and if the goat was killed, we can also tell whether it was killed by a cheetah, whether it was strangled, or whether it was killed by a leopard because of the spine kill. Yes.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I guess the difference between Africa and India, where they've been reintroduced, is there's sort of a long-established philosophy, isn't there, in India, where it's all about living with the animals and protecting wildlife as a natural way of life through their religions, whereas it's slightly different in Africa. Would you agree with that?
Well, okay. So in India, they are living on a reserve. They're living in Kuno, and it's a private reserve where technically the cheetah doesn't do quite as well in reserve. They're very free ranging. They need a lot of land. They do have quite a bit of land in India, and eventually they will be reintroduced into the full wild there. In Africa, they do much better in the wild, where they can free range and take however much land they need to find the prey, to find their mates, to continue to raise, their babies, and continue to try and increase the population. In Namibia is the only country in Africa right now that has a stable population of cheetah. Everywhere else, the populations of cheetah are declining. So it is still a huge issue in Africa.
Hi, it's Bob here. Just a quick interlude. Hope you're enjoying this episode. And if you would like to hear more interesting interviews, we have over 80 episodes to date with many fascinating guests talking about a wide variety of topics, which include music, history, philosophy, fitness, food and drink, adventure, contemporary culture, and many, many more. I'm sure there's something that you'd really enjoy. So all you need to do is just visit undercurrentstories.com or search Undercurrent Stories in any of the podcast platforms. And now back to the show. So I'd love to hear, and I'm sure listeners would love to hear about your experience in Namibia. So you went to, was it for about a month at the beginning of the year?
Yes. So CCF has a program where you can be a working guest and you pay for the opportunity to work there. And you can work there for 2 weeks or for 4 weeks. And I never do anything halfway. So I elected to work for 4 weeks. And I went with the attitude that I was not going to say no to anything. So you are assigned a responsibility. You find out what you're going to be working on the night before. So I would either be working on the cheetah team, and I worked the cheetah team quite often. And the day that you are on the cheetah team is the hardest working day that you're ever going to have. You start early. You might be working with the cheetah run. You're feeding the cheetah. We had 30 cheetah, I think, in Namibia at that time. We feed the cheetah that are both in the central area that are closer to where the research center is. We feed cheetah that are out in larger habitats. We fed cheetah that were in areas that were in a quarantine because we were going to re-release them to the wild, and we wanted to keep them separate from humans. You had to clean up after them. We had to, water them. We had to make sure that they were healthy. Sometimes we had to do med checks. And we ran them, and we would get in a truck and we would run them. So much work, so many dishes, so much time. And then there was days where we would be working on the dog team, where we would be working with the livestock-guarding dogs. So you would feed them twice a day. You had to clean up after them. You had to make sure that they had water. I was there in February, and average temperatures were about 35 to 40 degrees Celsius, which is over 95 degrees Fahrenheit. It was very, very hot. Often rained. It was much rainier than it is right now. And then we would walk the dogs. If it wasn't too hot in the afternoon, we would take the dogs out for walks. And we had, because we have all those goats, we have Dancing Goat Creamery. And Dancing Goat Creamery, we would make feta cheese, which we sold as part of the meals at our Cheetah Cafe, or we got to eat because they fed us. The feta cheese was delicious. We made goat cheese ice cream, goat ice cream, goat yogurt, and then we also provided goat milk to some of our workers. We also had a garden. We grew a lot of our vegetables and some of our fruits there. So that those were also part of what we sold in the Cheetah Cafe and what we ate. There was the Cheetah Cafe that I worked in. So as part of the hospitality and tourism, I worked in the Cheetah Cafe. And because I like to cook, they also put me to work a little bit helping cook. And then I also helped work in the gift shop by doing inventory and tagging gifts. There is so much to do. I think also when they found out that I had familiarity with horses, I helped take care of some of the horses. And I would go in morning and evenings to feed and let them out and bring them back in. So there was a lot to do, and every day was different. And every day, and actually, if any of your listeners are on Facebook, and if they want to look me up, my name is Sue. My last name is Heim, Heim. I posted almost daily public posts on Facebook trying to identify what few pictures I had taken that day that would be relevant. and describing what I was doing and why I was doing it. And I literally had the best time ever. And I'm currently working on planning my next trip back, as a matter of fact.
It sounds like a fantastic experience. And the question I'm dying to ask is, you mentioned there that you were sort of working with the cheetahs and feeding them in particular. How physically close were you to the cheetahs?
So Namibia has a law. You cannot pet a cheetah. It is illegal to have a cheetah as a pet. So because I am not a zookeeper or a veterinarian, I could not physically touch a cheetah at any time, except for the rare occasion when we had a cheetah that was in the veterinary hospital, and we were changing out radio collars, getting ready to doing a pre-release check, and they were asleep, so I could do a little touch then. They were between me and a fence. There was a fence between me and the cheetah. After the first week, apparently I have a unique voice, and the cheetahs would recognize my voice. And they also knew that if I was anywhere near them, I more than likely was going to be feeding them. So they knew that they could come up, and I would fairly soon going to be putting food in bowls for them, and they would be getting fed. But if it was not close to lunchtime, if it was first thing in the morning, they would be lazing underneath a tree, watching me walk by as I walked to go to start working on the cheetah run, or if I was heading to the Dancing Goat Creamery or wherever. They would just lay there and watch me. Sometimes they would run along with me, but most of the time they just lays there and watched me unless it was lunchtime.
A question I've got, and it's probably quite an obvious answer, but why are you not? I know you said there's a law forbidding it, but why aren't you able to just pat or stroke a cheetah?
So Namibia is very, very strict about this. They do not want cheetahs to be interpreted as pets. So petting a cheetah implies that they are a pet. Like you would pet your domestic cat at home. You'd like scratch it underneath the chin. They don't want anybody to interpret a cheetah as being a pet. And as the CCF facility, we do have guests that visit. We don't want guests to see anybody outside of one of the keepers or one of the vets in with the cheetahs. I could never go in with a cheetah. What we did when we fed them is the cheetahs would be in a separate area, not where they were going to be fed. And I would go into the area where we would feed them, put down their bowls, and as soon as I was done, I would lock that up, and then we would open up the gate and they could come rushing in. And rushing in they did. They would rush in and dirt would be flying and they would be scarfing on their food immediately. But I was never in the same area. And we did the same thing with the 3 cheetah that we did a re-release. We had 2 girls and a boy. We kept them wild, and they never wanted anything to do with us. They literally would hiss and spit and run away from us whenever we went nearby. But as soon as we put the meat down and we opened and we left the area and we opened up the gate so that they could come in and get the meat, they came running right in and got the meat, but they wanted nothing to do with humans. So the ambassador animals, they are, it's important to understand that we had, aside from the 3 that we were re-releasing, the rest of the animals that we had that we were taking care of in Namibia are cheetahs that couldn't be re-released. Either they got to us very young or they had medical conditions that precluded them from being re-released. If a cheetah came to us and they had been with their mom up to about age 6 months, they were candidates for re-release. They had been with mom long enough to know what to hunt, how to hunt, what predators to avoid, and they could potentially be re-released. The rest of the cheetahs, they were going to live the rest of their lives at the CCF facility in Namibia. And the ones that we get as a result of confiscation in Somaliland, they usually come in so young and in such poor condition that there's no way that they are ever going to be able to be re-released. So we were caring for these cheetahs for the rest of their lives. And as I said, they could live to be, almost 18 years old in human care.
Yeah. And did you ever have the opportunity? I keep referring to the speed because that's what fascinates me the most. Did you ever experience or see a cheetah do this sort of 65 miles an hour that they do?
So the cheetahs in the conservation center don't actually get up to 70 miles per hour because they live in, they're living in human care. They do have areas where they can run, and we do have large yards that they can run in. And when we run them in the large yards, when we're not doing a cheetah run, when we're running them in large yards, we're in a truck and we are holding large, chunky pieces of meat because they know that once they're finished running, they're going to get a piece of meat. But I'm not 100% certain that we've gotten up to that 70 miles, 113 kilometers per hour in the trucks, because we're running the trucks in their territory on, it's in dirt areas. It's not on a paved road. The cheetah run. So we, every morning, and we don't do it unless there's guests that are there to watch the cheetah run. And you can stay. That we have what we call the Cheetah View Lodge. You can stay at the Cheetah View Lodge, or you can pay to come and watch the cheetah run. We have a cheetah run where the cheetahs will let out 1 to 3 cheetahs at a time, and they can choose to chase after a lure. And the cheetah, and what happens is you are escorted out into the middle of that yard, and you are inside of a cage. And then we bring the cheetahs out, and then the cheetahs will run right in front of you. It's a sort of a square, the way the lure runs, and you're at the top end of the square, so they will run right past you. We will also stop the lure in front of you so that we will reward the cheetah because they're doing, what we want them to do. But we will also reward them so that you can get a little bit closer look at the cheetah, and they get some nice little pieces of meat while they're sitting right there. And then they will take off if they want, running again. They don't get to top speed when they're doing a cheetah run either. And it's funny because some of the cheetahs will start running and they'll decide, I think I'm done. And they'll diagonally cut across and they'll just saunter around. But they're cheetah being cheetah, and everything is always by choice. We're never going to force them to do something that they don't want to do.
No. Did you get a chance much to see the country of Namibia?
Yes, I did. So as a working guest, you always got one day off. And I was able to store up a couple of my initial days off. And I went to Etosha National Park, and we drove around for a couple of days to a bunch of different water holes. First of all, it's 140 something hectares. The CCF has a lot of property from where we are outside of Ochiwarongo all the way to the Waterberg Preserve. There's a massive amount of land. So we were doing game counts and sundowners and night drives on our own property. And I was seeing a lot of animals, so many animals on our own property. And then in Etosha, while I didn't see we didn't actually see an elephant, but we followed elephants because we could follow the elephant dung, and we followed the branches that they were tearing apart. I never actually saw an elephant, and we never saw a cheetah or a lion. It was just too hot in the daytime. I saw black rhinos for the first time ever in my life at the water hole at night at the place where I was staying. Had so much fun. So we spent 2 days and 1 night in Etosha National Park. And then didn't do a night drive there. We spent the time at the water hole there. So I did get a chance to see a little bit more. And then CCF is to get from San Diego to CCF was almost a 40-hour trip from flying from San Diego to get ultimately to Windhoek. And then from Windhoek in Namibia, it was a 4.5-hour drive to get to CCF. The nearest city is Ochiwarongo, which is about 35 minutes from CCF. So I was literally living in the bush, not in a tent. I was living in I had flush, running water and flushed toilets, and not necessarily every comfort of home because there was no air conditioning or heating, but I never lacked for anything. No. But there were I would get up in the mornings and there would be baboons in my front yard. And apparently there was a honey badger somewhere around that I never saw. So there were definitely wild animals near where I lived as well.
And did you meet obviously you met people that were from the country working at the CCF, but did you meet any villagers or anybody sort of outside of the organisation?
So we have a lot of local Namibians that work at CCF, and I met actually my first encounter with Namibians when I landed at Windhoek. The people that were supposed to pick me up, my drivers that were supposed to pick me up, got mixed up and didn't show. And there was a driver there that realized that I was stranded and I didn't have my phone set up yet to be able to call anybody. And so he jumped right in. He called my driver, figured out what had happened, volunteered to take me into the city. They figured out how to get the driver to pick me up. So we met at, I think, a KFC, which is hilarious because I'm a vegetarian. We met at a KFC and he actually waited with me for the hour until the driver showed up. Nice. So the Namibians are, there's a lot of Dutch in Windhoek, the city. And, but I also met a lot of local Namibians and then of course, because Ochiwarongo, I met a lot of local people that spoke the local dialects. And in fact, some of the keepers were local. The year before last, I had an opportunity to name a cheetah. And I insisted that I would only name the cheetah in a local dialect. I wasn't going to name a cheetah Sue or Bob. I wanted to name, something that made sense in Namibia. And so in one of the local Namibian dialects, I named a little female girl Kweli, which means moon. Okay. And so one of the lead keepers, that was his recommendation for a name for her. And so he was quite proud that I decided that was going to be her name. This year I have named a little boy, and his name is Itango, and Itango means sun in, I think, a different dialect. There is so many dialects in Namibia that it's not even funny. So when I go back to Namibia, I will have the sun and the moon waiting for me.
Fantastic. That sounds really good. So in terms of the work that CCF doing and the general receiving of it by the general population, in terms of the future, what is the general consensus? Are things still pretty critical? Is it getting better than what it was a few years ago, or is it getting worse? Where are we at the moment?
It's always going to be critical until the cheetah is removed from the vulnerable status on IUCN. So when they are no longer considered vulnerable and their numbers are increasing everywhere in the world, then it will no longer be an issue. When you no longer see cheetahs in somebody's household because they're considered a pet in somebody's house, we will have done our work. We're making progress, but it's not enough. There's still so much to do. It's why I am so dedicated to this cause. It's why I'm spending more time there than I literally was looking at a Facebook post today thinking I haven't been to Hawaii in a long time, but the next time I have toes in the sand, it's going to be in the desert in Namibia again. I absolutely 100% have passion about saving these animals. They can't save themselves. There's nothing that they can do to save themselves. They depend on what it is that we're doing and how we keep spreading the word. And the one thing that I find that actually really appeals to my heart is when I'm talking to kids. And I didn't get much of an opportunity to talk to kids when I was in Namibia, but when I'm at the zoo and I'm talking about the cheetahs at the zoo and I'm talking to kids, and they will say, like, they told their mother about the cheetah, or they know everything there is to know about the cheetah, or they told mom to make a donation to help the cheetah. Everything that I tell the kids, they are telling their parents. So they are the next generation that are going to help in saving the cheetah. anything that anybody can do to help save the cheetah is the most important thing. And there's a lot that people can do. I mean, even just volunteering. So we have local, even in the UK, we have local offices where you can choose to volunteer your time and help with CCF. You can volunteer at a zoo and talk about cheetah at the zoo. You can donate to CCF. You can donate or sponsor a cheetah at CCF. You can even sponsor a livestock guarding dog if cats are not your thing. And there's let me see, what else can you do? There's so much other things that you can do to support them.
So you don't necessarily have to go out there and be with the cheetahs. You can do something from your own home almost by donating or working voluntarily at an office or something like that.
Yes, there's so much that you can do. There's so much that you can do at home. It's every tiny little bit helps. There's nothing that is too small.
Do you feel that the Namibian government are supporting everything that you're doing and cracking down on those people that are in effect criminals?
Yes. So the Namibian government, it's the Ministry of the Tourism and Environment, I think, when they find a cheetah, when somebody surrenders a cheetah to them, especially in the southwestern part of Namibia where we're at, they will bring the cheetah to us. And they also are involved in bringing the cheetah to us in Somaliland when there's confiscations. They are very involved when we do a re-release. We had to contact the ministry in order to coordinate the re-release. We could not re-release until they were there. When they were there, they had to be present while we did the re-release. They are very, very, very invested in what it is that we're doing. And they're very, very invested in seeing this succeed, seeing what we're doing succeed. It's super important to them.
Well, that's really nice to know. I mean, the reason I asked that is that obviously the country itself is sort of crying out for food. And I just wondered whether the agricultural interests were put on top of the saving the cheetah at all by the government. But it sounds as though it's not.
No, so the cheetah lives in basically what is the savanna. So it's, as I said, the thorn bush. When we can eradicate some of the thorn bush and return the desert to savanna grasslands, that's where the cheetah is going to thrive. Yeah. And the farmlands are primarily goat herds, sheep herds, cows. They're grazing on the same lands that the cheetah are, so they can coexist in the same. Namibia, I fell in love with Namibia. Namibia is one of the safest countries in Africa. The people are super friendly. People are so friendly that if I accidentally dropped something, somebody would say, "I'm sorry." And I'd be, "Why are you sorry? I was the one that dropped it." It was so much fun. The drought is obviously a significant issue, and there are other species that are at risk in Namibia besides the cheetah. Like the pangolin is severely affected by the drought, and other animals. I noticed that when we were in Etosha, there had been a lot of rain while I was there, so there were a lot of water holes. But right now, if you go to Namibia, where I saw lush green grasses, it's completely brown, and all of the water holes are man-made. So you'll see more animals at the water holes and a greater variety of animals in the water holes if you go there right now than I did, because there were puddles of rain everywhere. An elephant could just drink on a road where there were ruts and there were water in the ruts, that elephants could drink there rather than having to go to a water hole and be all clustered around one water hole. It's interesting because elephants are considered an iconic species in Africa. There are hundreds of thousands of elephants in Africa, and they are not as endangered as the 7,000 numbers of cheetah in Africa. So that's, there's a little bit of a disparity there. Yes. That we're working to correct.
Yes. Well, that's good news. Now, if we've got any listeners that are interested in actually going overseas, and it might not necessarily be the cheetah, it could be another wild animal that's endangered, and you've done some of that. What advice would you give them, Sue?
I'm hoping to coordinate with the Giraffe Conservation Fund. In fact, they've already accepted me. I'm going to be doing some field work with the Giraffe Conservation Fund in Namibia as well. The giraffe are considered the silent extinction because nobody ever considers them as being part of an extinction, and they are also fairly endangered. Find an animal. It doesn't matter. Learn about the animals in Africa. Find an animal that you're invested in. Become informed, and then and do what you can to help. It doesn't have to be a cheetah. It doesn't have to be a giraffe. It could even be an elephant. Do whatever you can. Go to CCF if you're interested at all in cheetah, or if you're at all interested in just going to Namibia. Swing by CCF. You don't have to stay. You don't even have to be a working guest. You can just visit for the day, and you can go on a game tour. You can go on a ride and a drive and watch the cheetahs run. You can learn all about cheetahs and some other animals there. There's so much that you can do, and so much that you can do to help. Oh, and the one other thing that I forgot, we are doing, Canada has sponsored a Cheetah Fit Challenge. So starting here soon, and you can find it on the website at cheetah.org. It's basically a virtual challenge. So you can run, walk, swim, hike, bike, kayak, and all you do is you make a commitment for 2 weeks that you're going to do something, and you sign up and you'll get a t-shirt. And then if you can get sponsors to sponsor you, if you make whatever your goal is, and help raise money for cheetah. So we're calling it the Cheetah Fit Challenge. And basically, you don't have to be as fast as a cheetah. You just have to do something to help the cheetah.
Now, I was going to ask you what's next, but I think you've answered that question by saying that you're planning another trip.
Yes, I am. I'm hoping to get there the end of this year. And so I'm hoping to be in Namibia in February, in January through the beginning of February.
Okay, that's great stuff. So we were talking a bit earlier on about the sort of danger aspect of big cats. How dangerous to a human would a cheetah be?
So cheetahs, I think I mentioned that cheetahs are non-confrontational to animals. They're also non-confrontational to humans. They definitely don't like humans if they run into them in the wild. And more often than not, if you saw a cheetah, it's going to hiss at you, maybe spit at you. It's going to slap the ground, and then it's going to turn and run away. It definitely doesn't want anything to do with humans.
That sounds very much like my cat when he's got this thing about one of our neighbours.
Pretty much, it's most cats definitely don't want anything to do, but they are definitely not like a leopard, where a leopard might be a little bit more threatened and might decide it wants to attack. A cheetah is definitely never going to attack a human.
Well, Sue, this has been a really fascinating conversation. I think it's really been interesting to learn more about cheetahs and the work taking place to protect them, and the work that you've been doing. I think it's fantastic. My guest today has been Sue Heim. Sue has recently returned from Namibia, Southwest Africa, where she worked with the Cheetah Conservation Fund. And you can find links to the Cheetah Conservation Fund and Sue's work on the show notes. Thank you for coming on the show, Sue.
Oh, Bob, thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you.